The rain poured down relentlessly, a heavy curtain that blurred the streetlights and soaked the weary travelers scurrying for shelter. On the outskirts of a small southern town, an elderly black man named Harold Douglas drove his well-worn pickup truck along the slick road. The truck's heater sputtered warm air, and jazz music from a cassette tape filled the cabin. Harold was on his way home after a long day volunteering at the local food pantry, a commitment he had upheld for decades since retiring from his job as a carpenter. This story opens our eyes to several prejudices people like Harold face from day to day. Even if they are just trying to be kind or to help someone, it always comes off wrong. Before we continue with this beautiful but sad story of Harold, please show us your support by hitting the subscribe button. Thank you. Harold Douglas was a 72-year-old retired carpenter with deep roots in the community. Known for his quiet demeanor, generosity, and wisdom, Harold had spent most of his life working with his hands, building homes, and helping neighbors. Even after retirement, Harold was far from idle. He devoted much of his time to volunteering at the local food pantry, distributing meals to those in need and mentoring younger volunteers. His acts of kindness had earned him respect among many, but also subtle resentment from a few who couldn't reconcile his grace with their own biases. Harold lived alone in a modest, single-story home he had built with his own hands decades ago. Situated on a quiet street just outside the main town, the house was a reflection of Harold's personality, sturdy, practical, and welcoming. The house had a small garden where Harold grew vegetables, often sharing his harvest with his neighbors or the food pantry. Harold's wife, Louise, had passed away 5 years earlier after a long battle with cancer. Though deeply pained by her absence, Harold found solace in their memories and in his efforts to continue the community work they had both cherished. Harold's only son, Marcus, lived in another state, pursuing a career as an engineer. They spoke frequently, and Marcus often worried about his father living alone, but Harold insisted he was fine. He found purpose in his volunteer work, his faith, and the quiet rhythms of his retirement. On this particular day, as he approached a dimly lit bus stop, Harold noticed a young white woman standing in the downpour. Her drenched coat clung to her, and her arms were crossed tightly against the cold. She glanced nervously over her shoulder as if she sensed someone or something following her. Harold slowed the truck and rolled down the passenger side window, leaning across the seat. "Miss, do you need a ride?" Harold's voice was kind but firm, reflecting his years of experience and wisdom. The woman hesitated, her pale face illuminated by the truck's dim interior light. Finally, she nodded and climbed in, her soaked clothes leaving water stains on the seat. "Thank you," she murmured, clutching her bag tightly. "I didn't know if I'd make it home tonight." Harold offered her a warm smile. "No one should be out in this kind of weather." "Where to?" She gave him an address a few miles away, and they drove in silence for a while. Harold noticed her glancing repeatedly at the side mirror, her tension palpable. "Are you all right, miss?" he asked gently. "I think someone's been following me," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "I saw a man at the bus stop earlier. He didn't feel right." Harold frowned, his protective instincts kicking in. "You're safe now," he assured her. "We'll get you home." As they turned onto a dark road leading to her neighborhood, flashing red and blue lights suddenly lit up the truck's cabin. A patrol car pulled them over, siren wailing. Harold sighed and pulled to the side, his hands resting on the wheel. "Just stay calm," he told the woman, whose face had gone pale. A burly white officer approached the driver's side, flashlight glaring in Harold's face. "License and registration," the officer barked. Harold complied without hesitation, his steady hands betraying none of the anger or fear he felt. "What's going on, officer?" Harold asked politely. "We got a report of a suspicious vehicle matching this description," the officer said. He then glanced at the woman in the passenger seat, his tone shifting to something more aggressive. "Miss, are you all right? Are you here against your will?" The officer continued, "Why are you driving with a young woman at this hour? Do you know her?" The woman's eyes widened in shock. "What? No. He was helping me. I was stranded in the rain. Harold patiently explained that Clara was stranded in the rain and he had simply offered her a ride. Clara corroborated his story, but the officers seemed unconvinced. The officer's suspicion only seemed to deepen. "Step out of the vehicle, both of you," he ordered. Harold sighed and did as he was told, his calm demeanor masking the growing knot of frustration in his chest. Clara also complied, shaking both from the rain and fear. Before the stop and search by the police officer, on this same night Harold gave Clara a ride in the rain. He had just finished an evening shift at the food pantry. The pantry's location, in a rougher part of town, had always been a source of concern for some of Harold's friends, who warned him about the risks of being there after dark. That evening, Harold noticed a group of younger men loitering near the parking lot as he left. Their faces were partially obscured by the shadows, but Harold thought little of it, offering them a polite nod as he passed. One of them muttered something under his breath, and Harold felt their eyes on him as he walked to his truck. Though he shrugged it off, he couldn't help but feel a prickle of unease. Unbeknownst to Harold, one of the young men followed him in a car, lingering at a distance. The man, who had a history of petty theft, recognized Harold's generosity but viewed it through a lens of mistrust and jealousy. When the police later received an anonymous tip about Harold's truck and a suspicious older man picking up a young white woman, the caller was this same individual. His motive wasn't entirely clear. Perhaps it was spite, or perhaps he thought Harold's kindness would be misinterpreted and create trouble. This act of malice compounded the situation for Harold and Clara, as the police responded with undue suspicion. Harold's earlier unease from the food pantry lingered in his mind during the tense traffic stop, though he didn't connect the dots until much later, when the anonymous tip came to light during the media storm surrounding his arrest. So, the police pulling Harold over was fueled by a mix of suspicion, bias, and miscommunication. As Harold stood in the rain, the officer began questioning him harshly, insinuating that he had coerced the woman into his truck. The woman protested vehemently, explaining that Harold had been nothing but kind to her. Another patrol car arrived, and soon the quiet street was filled with officers, their suspicion intensifying. Despite their explanations, Harold was ordered to the back of the police cruiser. Clara tried to reason with the officers, pleading he didn't do anything wrong. He was just helping me. The officers dismissed her protests, suspecting ulterior motives based on the anonymous tip they had received. Harold, maintaining his composure, asked if he was under arrest. The officer replied tersely, "You are being detained for questioning." Harold was handcuffed and placed in the back of a squad car while the officers searched his truck. Meanwhile, Clara was questioned separately by another officer. She was visibly distraught but adamant about Harold's innocence. Despite her protests, she was left on the roadside as Harold was driven to the station. The officers informed her she could give a statement later if needed, but they refused to offer her further assistance. Clara had insisted on going with them to the station, but to no avail. The scene escalated further when a crowd of curious onlookers gathered, whispering and pointing. Harold's dignity, hard-earned over decades, felt stripped away under the weight of their judgmental stares. The woman was frantic, trying to convince the officers of Harold's innocence, but her words seemed to fall on deaf ears. At the station, Harold was booked and placed in a holding cell. The officers seemed to operate under the assumption that Harold's story didn't add up. They mentioned the anonymous call reporting a suspicious older man picking up a young woman, implying that Harold had sinister intentions. Harold tried to remain calm but was deeply hurt by the insinuations. He insisted on his innocence and asked for legal counsel. Harold spent 3 days in the holding cell. During this time, he was repeatedly questioned, and his truck was searched for any evidence of wrongdoing. The situation became even more humiliating when the story leaked to the local press, and the headlines sensationalized the incident, "Elderly man suspected in kidnapping case." Clara's situation was more complex than it initially appeared. While she was indeed a single mother, she occasionally relied on her parents, Margaret and George Evans, for support. Clara did not live with her parents permanently, but they played a significant role in her life, helping her balance work and raising her young son. On the night of the incident, she had been returning home from a late shift when her car broke down, leaving her stranded in the rain. After Harold's arrest, Clara was shaken but determined to clear his name. Once she made it home, she immediately contacted her parents, explaining the situation and how Harold's kind act had been misinterpreted. Margaret and George, who were deeply empathetic and had witnessed their own share of injustices in their lives, were outraged by what had happened to Harold. Though they did not live in the same household, Clara maintained a close relationship with her parents. Her strong bond with them made it natural for her to involve them when she needed advice or help. George, a retired journalist, understood the power of the media and recognized that Harold's case had the potential to spiral out of control if the wrong narrative continued to dominate. Margaret, a retired teacher, had long been active in their community and knew how to mobilize local networks. Together, they sprang into action. George leveraged his old contacts in the local media to spread Clara's side of the story, emphasizing Harold's innocence and the misunderstanding at the heart of the incident. Margaret contacted friends in the community to amplify the truth and organize support for Harold. The Evanses' active involvement caught the attention of sympathetic journalists who were appalled by the sensationalized coverage of Harold's arrest. Their interviews with Clara, coupled with her heartfelt recounting of Harold's kindness and the absence of any wrongdoing, began shifting public perception. Margaret and George also accompanied Clara to the police station when she submitted her written statement. Their presence, along with their firm advocacy, added weight to Clara's testimony and made the authorities take a second look at the evidence. Their ability to articulate Harold's plight and rally community support turned the tide in his favor. At the same time, footage from a nearby gas station surveillance camera surfaced, showing Harold and Clara's interaction before the ride. The video clearly depicted Clara approaching Harold's truck and accepting the ride voluntarily. This evidence, combined with Clara's testimony, forced the police to admit their mistake. After 3 harrowing days, Harold was released. He emerged from the station exhausted but dignified, grateful to Clara and her family for standing by him. The public outcry following his arrest sparked broader conversations about biases in law enforcement and the dangers of snap judgments. Harold's community rallied around him, reaffirming their respect and appreciation for the kind-hearted man they had always known. Clara, deeply surprised by the ordeal and the humiliation Harold had received because of her, insisted on giving Harold a ride home. On the way, she shared more about her life. "I am a single mother working 2 jobs to make ends meet. I am sorry for what I had put you through. All this was because of me. It was never what I wished for." Harold, ever the wise and compassionate soul, listened intently, offering words of encouragement. Harold's son, Marcus, was living in a different state, working as an engineer and raising his own family. Their relationship was warm, though they didn't speak as often as Harold might have liked. However, Marcus heard about his father's ordeal quite late. When Marcus heard about his father's arrest through a concerned neighbor who saw the story on the local news, he was both shocked and outraged. He knew his father's character, selfless, kind, and always willing to help others. Marcus immediately called the police station, demanding information about his father's situation. When he finally got through to Harold on the phone, the conversation was both emotional and reassuring. Harold, ever the calm and resilient one, told Marcus not to worry. "Son, it's all a misunderstanding," Harold said, his voice steady but tired. "I couldn't just leave that young woman out in the rain. I did what I thought was right." Marcus, however, couldn't contain his anger. "Dad, this isn't right. You shouldn't be punished for helping someone. I'm flying out there right now. You don't deserve this." True to his word, Marcus booked the earliest flight he could and arrived the following morning. By the time he reached the town, Harold had been released from his holding cell due to mounting public pressure and Clara's heartfelt testimony. Marcus went straight to Harold's house, where he found his father sitting quietly on the porch, sipping tea and trying to process everything. Marcus embraced his father tightly. "I'm sorry you had to go through this, Dad," he said, his voice heavy with emotion. "I can't believe the world is like this." Harold patted his son's back and offered a faint smile. The world isn't all bad, son. Look at Clara, she stood up for me. And the people rallying behind me now? That gives me hope. Marcus didn't share his father's optimism at that moment, but he admired Harold's ability to see the good even in the face of adversity. Determined to protect his father's reputation, Marcus joined forces with Clara and her parents, attending press conferences and speaking out against the racial profiling and injustice Harold had endured. In the end, Marcus's presence brought Harold immense comfort and reaffirmed the strength of their bond. Witnessing his father's unwavering dignity inspired Marcus to be more proactive in addressing injustices in his own community, ensuring Harold's legacy of kindness and resilience lived on. The incident once again gained attention on social media after a bystander's video of the arrest went viral. The story, however, continued as people were provoked because of what they had to face in the hands of the law enforcement agents every day. People who looked like Harold. The video painted a harrowing picture of racial profiling, sparking outrage and calls for accountability. News outlets picked up the story, and soon Harold became a reluctant symbol of resilience and grace under injustice. But the most unexpected twist came weeks later when Clara returned to Harold's door, not with thanks, but with a surprising revelation. She had uncovered evidence linking the officer who arrested Harold to corruption within the police department. Clara's suspicions about being followed that night were not unfounded. The officer had been targeting vulnerable individuals as part of a larger, sinister scheme. Harold and Clara teamed up to expose the truth, their unlikely friendship becoming a force for justice. Together, they unraveled a web of corruption that shook the community and led to widespread reforms within the local police force. Harold's reputation was restored, and he became a beloved figure in the town, known not just for his kindness but for his courage in standing against injustice. In the end, the experience brought unexpected blessings. Harold's quiet heroism inspired others to act with compassion and integrity, proving that even in the face of adversity, kindness could prevail. And Clara, once a stranger in the rain, became like family, her bond with Harold a testament to the power of human connection. Though Harold's life had been built on a foundation of integrity and selflessness, the night's events showed how easily perceptions could be twisted. Yet, his unwavering character and the truth eventually shone through, restoring his reputation and reminding the community of the enduring power of justice and kindness. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe to Home of Stories TV. And do not forget to turn on the notification bell for more inspiring videos. Drop your comments below, let us know your thoughts.